I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Jennings Smith. Jennings is the CEO of My First Million in Multifamily, co-creator of and coaching and mentor program, The Deal Room, and the host of Unlock Your Life podcast. So Jennings, first I just want to say thanks for coming on the show today. Thanks for taking out the time. I really appreciate you being here.
Hey, Jason. No, thanks for the invite. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's your bio is extremely impressive. I don't want to read it off. I want to let you kind of tell the listeners your story, kind of let us know how you got started and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I started off as a contractor. I finished high school and I worked for a year for a construction company for $10 an hour. And I mean, we did it all. We were digging the foundation, framing, siding, roofing. Their model was do everything themselves as cheaply as possible. Don't sub anything out. So I did get to learn a lot of the trades and a lot of how a house is built. And I'd always been mechanically minded. And so my dad kind of encouraged me to go into construction. But I worked for a year and I realized, man, I'm not ready to work 60 hours a week for $10 an hour quite yet. So I did end up going to college but then in the summers, I would come home and I built a rental home for my dad. So my dad had gotten into the retirement game very, very late. He had kind of worked his whole life. He sold fish and frozen foods door to door. So he knew the grit of what it took with sales, but he realized, wow, I don't have much net worth to fall back on. And so in his, I think, mid to late 40s, he started to buy rental homes. And so we were building these little rental homes. And so for 90 days, I mean, I was working 16 hours a day, building these rental homes. And then at the end of the summer, my dad closed it, refinanced it, and he gave me a check for I think $9,000, and he paid me like $10 an hour to build this house, and I got a bonus. And then he promptly took it back and sent it to Clemson University to pay my tuition. So, but I realized, okay, I can do this, right? And then the next summer, we built the same house, except he sold it as a spec home, and we ended up making about 60 grand. And so he took 30 of it for putting up the money in the land, and I made $30,000. And when I made $30,000 in the summer, I was like, I'm hooked. I want to be a contractor. And so yeah, I paid my half of Clemson, and I still had money left over. So I went to Clemson very rich, and by Christmas break, I had blown through all that money. I don't know where it went, but it was gone. I graduated and kept building, and then the recession hit me, and 2010 hit me pretty hard. Charleston, where I'm from, was a little bit insulated, but by 2010, I mean, building just stopped, and I was losing money. My company had lost 50 grand. I had employees. I owed the IRS because I had made money the year before and hadn't paid any taxes, like a responsible entrepreneur. And I owed Home Depot credit card like 15 grand. I owed the IRS like 20 grand. And I was in a bad spot. I was trying to renovate my house that I was going to move into, and I was in a rental. So I was paying like 2 mortgages essentially. And it got so bad that I would work all day. And then at night I would go to Home Depot, grab a couple of those like peep sites, those security, like little, you put in your front door so you can see who's at your front door. Yeah. And I would go knock doors and say, hey, I can install this for $20 right now if you want it. And I could, if I knocked enough doors, I could sell 4 or 5 of those a day, and I could make an extra $100. And I needed $100 to like keep food on the table and keep my rent paid. And it was a very stressful time for me and my wife. I had just got married, and I had been this like big shot, making 6 figures in my early 20s to like scraping by, owing so much money. At the time, I thought I was never going to crawl out of this debt. And, but it showed me what I was made of. It was like, okay, I can make it no matter what it takes. I'm gonna make it through this, and I'm gonna do whatever it has to take. I'm gonna keep working. I'm gonna keep my feet moving, and it put metal in my backbone. And so I crawled my way out of that, but it taught me, dude, recessions are going to come again. Construction is not always going to be good, and you got to be prepared. And look at what your dad did. He's got some rental homes, and if you start now, you're gonna do pretty well probably. And so that sort of was the seed for my real estate at the time. And so I ended up saving 5 grand, and I bought a trailer, put somebody, fixed it up, put somebody in it. They didn't pay because I didn't vet them out. And then I finally almost gave up at that point, but I got them out. I resold it, and I bought another one. And then that one worked. And then I bought another rental, and that one worked. And then eventually I had like 6 or 7 trailers and 2 rental homes. And I was making a few grand a month in passive income. And I'm like, hey, this is working. And I looked at my balance sheet, and almost all of my wealth was tied up in that. And I realized, man, I'm trading all my time for money in this construction company, and I'm making a living, but I'm not really building anything of value. And so that's where I was like, I gotta go big. I've got to do bigger things. I want to have 1,000 rental homes. And if anybody out there listening has a couple rental homes, you don't want 1,000 rental homes, because the scalability of that, and the headache, and the managerial nightmare that would be, is just not worth it. And I talked to some advisors and mentors, and they're like, no, if you want to scale, you need to look at commercial, right? You need to look at apartments, self-storage, mobile home parks, retail, that kind of thing. And so multifamily was the obvious choice to me, because I was sort of like familiar with it, right? Like it's kind of like single family, but it's just bigger. So I could kind of get my head around that. And so I made the decision to go into multifamily. I'm going to take a break because I just been talking for 10 minutes straight.
Yeah, no, that was great. And I appreciate you telling that story. And I think there's a ton of like value in there, and lessons to people, and also very funny sort of parallels a lot of what I did. I mean, I started in construction as well, just working as many hours as you could work, and making low hourly wage. But it does help you. I think, it plants work ethic. It also teaches you something, especially if you're going to go into real estate and construction and all that. Like, it teaches you what you need to know for a value add strategy, or flipping a house, or whatever it might be. So, there are, I think, certainly benefits to putting in the time there and getting kind of that experience. And then, you went through a recession, which nobody wants to go through them, but if you're going to be in real estate, it's going to happen, right? And not just real estate. If you're going to be, recessions can hit any business sector. So it's not just a real estate problem. I think a lot of people think about it from a real estate perspective, but it certainly impacts every industry when we run through a recession. What I thought was really telling, sort of about your success, is how you went through and pushed through when times were hard. You told the story of going door to door with the peepholes and installing those for people, and so, and it's just kind of a funny example, but that's it. That's people that make it as entrepreneurs, investors. That like, you just do whatever whatever you have to do. And back then, I don't think there was Uber, so I think that I've had other guests on the show that are like,
I would have been doing that.
Exactly right. Like, there's this like, I mean, there's been times where I've considered it. It's like, well, I could always drive for Uber if I need to make some extra money. So it's kind of it's just interesting, and I think relevant for people to hear that, like, the people that succeed, they just do whatever they need to do. They don't quit because it gets hard. You figure it out, and then realize that on the other side, things will get better, and you'll be, sort of stronger for it. So when you decided to make that shift into commercial and multifamily, what steps did you take to kind of, sort of shift and start that journey?
Yeah, well, I want to comment on something that you said. Appreciate it, because it's the ability to work hard, never say die, not quit. It's preached a lot, especially on social media, and I think that it's a requirement, right? It's basic. It's level one. Okay, if you don't have that, don't even try. But it's not enough, and I feel like a lot of messages stop short, where it's like, if you just work hard and you do the right things, you're gonna make it. You're gonna be rich. You're gonna be successful. You're gonna achieve your goals. That's not true. It takes a vision, it takes skills, it takes value, and you have to be in the right vehicle, right? It's like, I don't care how badly or how hard you want to get across the Atlantic Ocean. If you're in a, F-150, you ain't making it unless you're on, a shipping container. But you have to have the right vehicle. And I feel like that's where I started to shift, answering your next question here, to where I wanted to go was, am I in the right vehicle? Am I working hard on the right thing? Working hard is a given. I'm going to do that. You're going to do that. And I would imagine most of your listeners, they're investing in themselves and they can work hard. But are you working hard on the right things? And that's where I was like, if I work hard on acquiring more trailers and more single family homes, I'll get to a couple $1,000,000 in net worth, maybe $5, $10, $15,000 a month in passive income. And that's cool. And that wasn't where I wanted to go, though. At this point, we have a $60 million portfolio, and we're building generational wealth. That's where I wanted to go. And so to get there, I had to think differently. I had to think differently about the problem, because if you're trying to just like double your output or increase your output by 10, 20%, okay, just work harder, work a little bit more hours, hire one more employee. But if you're trying to go somewhere that's completely different, you may need a totally different vehicle. And that's where I started to look at apartments, and it was very scary, like big down payments, big loans, big problems. But I knew that if I wanted to be compensated the way I wanted to be compensated, and make the money I wanted to make and make the impact I wanted to make, I was going to have to be a little bit more courageous and get out of my comfort zone. And so I like to make that point, because I don't want people to think that if I just work hard, everything's going to be okay. Yeah, that's a given. That's step one. But you got to make sure that you're solving the right problem.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think, yeah, because there are lots of people out there working extremely hard,
Absolutely,
but aren't growing their wealth. So that's a very valuable sort of perspective on it. And I think, as you said, you kind of need all of it, right? You need that ability to work hard, the willingness to work hard, but you also need the correct vehicle. You need the education. You probably need some level of mentorship. Like, you need the vision to say, to think bigger, to think, a lot of people, as you said, they want a little bit more. And so really, what do? You increase, your output by 10 or 20%. That's understandable. That's something that people can kind of be comfortable with. Oh, I am going to drive for Uber a little bit to help, buy my new house, or whatever it is. I want to buy a boat. But that's not what we're talking about here. You're really talking about, as you said, generational wealth, impact, that kind of thing. And true growth requires a little bit more than just hard work. It has there's risk associated with it. You have to, as you said, bigger deals mean bigger deposits, bigger problems. But I can't remember exactly who says the quote, but there's that quote about the higher the compensation, the bigger the problem you need to solve, that kind of thing. So it's really a great point to bring up here, and sort of point that in that progression of growth within a business or investing or whatever, at some point you are going to have to kind of be uncomfortable and push beyond, kind of whatever those self-imposed limits are, limiting beliefs, whatever you may have. You've got to get past them. So that's a great point.
And that's why when you hear successful people talk, a lot of times they are talking about mindset and the books they're reading, getting around different circles, getting around different mentors. You can't think outside of your own box, right? If you could, you there would be no box.
Yeah.
And so you've got to invest in your mindset. And I know it sounds like a broken record, because a lot of people are talking about that. I mean, my podcast is focused on that. Your podcast is focused on that because we know it's the key, right? It is, it's incredibly important. The tactics, the work ethic, all that is worthless without that growth. If you never believe, if your brain thinks a problem is impossible to solve, it will not even try. It just shuts off, right? Like, let's say I say, hey, I want to buy a $4 million apartment complex. Okay, down payment's $1 million. I don't have $1 million. Boom, your brain's already moving on to something else that you can solve. And when you dig into that and say, well, am I asking the right question? Do I have $1 million? That's not the right question. It's like, well, how could I do this without $1 million? Who has $1 million? Could this work? How do other people are doing this? Getting curious about these things and being like, I don't have it all figured out yet, but I'm going to take the next step, and that's going to shed light on the next step. And eventually I'm going to get to where I'm going.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's the question of not, it's not saying I can't afford this. It's how can I afford this, or how, I can't make this happen. Is how can I make this happen? And it is very much just a different mindset, and being around other people that have already done it or are sort of making those same shifts, I think is incredibly important.
I was sitting at a poker table the other night, like in a buddy's garage, just like a neighborhood thing. And one of the guys there was talking about cars, and he was saying, do I like Ferrari or Lamborghini, or which one do I like better? And I was like, well, what do you want? Like, what would be your dream car? And he said, I haven't even thought about it because it's just such a pipe dream. Like that's never going to happen. Right. And this is a guy who, wife works very, very successful. He works very, very successful. And yet he's just shut that piece of his brain off like that. That's never going to happen. It's never going to be a possibility. You know what it is? It is never going to happen. And I hate to say that, but it's like, it starts with thinking, how could I do that? If I really want to do that, what's my why? Do I really want that? And if I do, how can I make that happen? Instead of just, I don't deserve that. I could never make that happen. That's a pipe dream. I've got a private jet back here. I'm way far away from owning or affording a private jet, and I don't know that I'll ever do it, because right now it's really hard for me to believe that that's even a possibility.
Right.
But I want to keep that in the back of my mind. Like it's there, and maybe it could happen. I'm trying. I mean, we're all growing at some state.
Right. Yeah. No, my, it's funny you mentioned the jet. My biggest thing, the biggest material thing that I want is to be able to fly private. I hate commercial flying. It like makes me crazy. I hate the delays, the being crammed in, whether even if you sit in first class, whatever it is, like I just think it's just a super inefficient way of travel. But it's kind of all that's available and to the general public, and the airlines know that, and so they can do kind of whatever they want. So it's I don't want to own one. I think that's probably beyond. I just want to be able to say, I fly, if I'm going to take my family on vacation, like we're going to fly private on this, because so we have complete control over, sort of when we leave, when we get there, you're not crowded on the plane. But it's having the ability to think that you can do that and to get to that level. And it's like, I think that's love him or hate him. I think one of the things, the big messages with Grant Cardone is that sort of that 10x mentality, where it's just a matter of, if you're simply putting a zero on something, putting another zero on something, right? You're like talking about your example of, well, I need $1 million to buy this $4 million apartment complex. And he would tell you, we'll solve the problem for, I need $10 million to buy a $40 million apartment complex. And it's just kind of, it's adding a zero. And so as you move through that progression in your life and entrepreneurial goals, it is just looking at it. Okay, what is that next step? How do I think a little bit bigger than you don't probably want to go from 1 million to 100 million, right? There are steps, but you do need to allow yourself to think bigger and to continue to push yourself forward.
Yeah, it's thought auditing, right? Like when you say I want to fly private, And then you audit the thoughts around that. Well, oh my gosh, it's $50,000 to fly, private one way. Or if I bought this membership, it would cost me $200,000 or $300,000 a year, whatever it is. And all these things, what are those thoughts? Writing them down and auditing. How is that making me feel? What is the emotion I'm having that's holding me back from that? And how can I change those thoughts around it? Just like you were saying, how can I do this? What would it look like? What kind of income would I need to make to make it reasonable for me to drop 50 grand to fly my family to Hawaii? To most people, they're just stop right there. Like, that is ridiculous. And I get it. Yeah. But they make them for somebody. Somebody's right. Flying in them.
Yeah. It's happening, right? And it's like, and I mean, for sure, like that, like there have definitely been times where, I mean, I have 2 kids now, and it's like there have been times where I would have thought, we can't go to Hawaii because we have to buy 4 tickets. Like, it's just, so
there's levels.
So, right. I get that. I've been at the point where it's like, can I put gas in my car? Because like that kind of, I mean, I've been there, and it's hard to shift to the way you look at it, right? It's like, you might, when you're younger, it might be a struggle to put gas in the car, and then might become something you don't think about, but you're thinking about a different car, or what, you know what I mean? It does, it's just kind of a step up progression, but it's allowing yourself to think about those things, and not just as dreams, as you said, as auditing your thoughts as to how do I get to those, how do I create the vision and the plan to execute that vision and get there and have, kind of the life that I want to have.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, and it starts with, for me, it was, I just bought a course, about $1,000 online course about multifamily, and went through it. And I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have a network. I wasn't surrounding myself with anybody. I was trying to make progress where I was, but at the time, I mean, that was a huge purchase for me. I mean, they kind of suckered me into it. It was a ClickFunnels funnel, and they were like, well, just buy the analyzer for $100. It's like, all right. And then they're like, hey, if you buy the whole course within 90 minutes, we'll credit the $100 towards the course. And I was like, all right. And then I did it, and it was a great decision. But I sat on that course for 2 years. I went through the videos, I consumed it for sure, but I didn't execute because I didn't have the mentoring. I didn't have the groups. I didn't have the ability to get out of my own way. I would just say I just didn't see it as possible, but I was trying, and I was putting together pitch decks. I was trying to raise some money. I was looking for deals, and eventually something came up, and I found a 12-unit online listed on Crexy. It was in North Carolina, and they only wanted like $250,000 for it. And I thought, oh man, this thing's got to be a disaster. So, and the financials were a disaster. They were losing money. But I went up there, and it looked good, and it was in decent condition. It was full, not a bad tenant base, very, very low rents, like $400 a month. And so I asked the seller, I said, listen, your property is great. It's fine. It's good, but it doesn't qualify for debt because your financials are bad. You're losing money. So it's not that I can't qualify for a loan, which was probably the truth, but I was like, but your property doesn't qualify. So would you owner finance me? He said, yeah, I'll owner finance you if you put down 70% or 30%. I'll finance you 70%. You have skin in the game, and if I take it back, I still have a good basis in it. So I was like, cool. Now I got 70% of the money taken care of, but I still needed about 90 grand for the down payment and a little bit of carrying costs. And so I went out, and people told me no. But somebody told me, yes, I'll do the deal. And we split it 60-40. I got 60%, he got 40%. And we went in there, we added utility bill back. We raised rents a little bit, $20. They were paying for trash for their city taxes, and they had a dumpster. So I eliminated the dumpster and just got the trash cans because they were double paying for trash. I got rid of the manager who was charging him for every little thing, and got a good local manager at like 8%. And all of a sudden this thing was making money. And my plan worked. And I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. And 18 months later, we ended up selling that property for $415,000. And so the investor made like 50% IRR, got his money back. I made almost 100 grand, or right at $100,000. And was like, dude, I just got a year's salary in one, deal. And by this point, or 18 months later, I had now closed a couple hundred units. I kept on going. But that 12 unit was the catalyst to be like, okay, I can do a 19 unit. Okay, I can do a 63 unit. Okay, I can do a 100 unit. Okay, we closed a 208 unit out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And talk about solving a problem. I mean, this thing was half empty, and then half of the tenant base wasn't paying, very distressed, needed $2.5 million worth of renovations. We were trying to close it right in the height of COVID. It was like June 2020, right when everything was going nuts. Bank pulled the loan 3 weeks before closing. We were about to lose $100,000 of earnest money. But that's where that metal kicked in. And we're like, look, let's talk to the next bank. Let's talk to the next bank. Let's keep going. We fell out of contract. Sellers threatening to sue us to get our EMD. We finally got another loan lined up. And then the seller's like, okay, yeah, we'll sell to you because you got the loan. And all in for $8 million. And now we're selling it for $14.1 million. So it's like, holy crap, home run. It's a 2.5-year cycle, but still I'm solving bigger problems now. But it started with, all right, let me just buy this course. Let me just find the first deal. All right, let me close this 12 unit. Let me raise 90 grand, because for that big deal, we were raising almost $3 million. So that's a big jump, but we didn't start there, right? It's a gradual progression to getting there. And I think that's smart because you can get in a lot of trouble by being too focused on the mindset and the growth for growth's sake and making mistakes. And I think that seared into my head. The recession really helped me be very cautious with scaling my portfolio. And so far, knock on wood, we've done really well, even with the tumultuous times. We're not taking on short-term bridge debt. We're not on floating rates. We've bought at a very low cost basis. We've only bought value add stuff where there's a real problem to solve. And that has served us very well.
Yeah. And in a really short time, you highlighted a lot of important things about, especially in this market, and probably having been through the previous recession, that stuff is just a part of you. But, fixed rate debt, value add where you can actually, it's not, you're not necessarily relying on the market to increase the value of your asset. You're relying on your business plan, your execution. You have a lot more control there. So I think all of those are really great points. And it goes to show you, you can be successful despite the sort of market cycles. And in fact, you can potentially use those market cycles to be to create success. The fact that you closed that in early COVID days in the middle of 2020, there's a lot of people that just stopped transacting during that time. Obviously the banks.
I wanted to stop. I wanted to walk away from that deal.
Yeah.
And I had a mentor, and I was like, dude, the bank pulled our loan. Like I just don't know. It just doesn't seem like things are lining up. He's like, well, is it a good deal? I said, yeah, it's a good deal. It's like, then close it. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
He's right. And we kept going.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that was the right decision, right? Obviously, and a lot of people stopped during, especially at the beginning of COVID. And then we had, a tremendous run up in prices sort of over those next couple of years. So a lot of people that didn't stop made a lot of money in a short period of time and were very, very successful with their strategies. So, I think it's there's a lot of lessons there. People can look at situations and find a reason not to do things. But in reality, if your sort of approach to it is, I'm going to execute despite the situations that I encounter, the troubles, I'm gonna take advantage when times are good, and I'm gonna push through and learn lessons when times aren't as good, and just that's how you create and maintain successful business and real estate investment portfolio. I think that's a great example of all that.
Yeah, contrarian is the way to go, right? And you think about in our circles, what is the common thing that everyone kind of agrees on, right? at least for in my circles, that everyone is agreeing on. This is probably what's going to happen. That's probably wrong. Like,
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh, like, I'm waiting. I'm sitting on cash. We're about to fall off a cliff. There's going to be a lot of deals coming. There's going to be blood in the streets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, okay, maybe we don't. Nobody has a crystal ball, but I could have said the same thing in January, February, March of 2020 when the world was going to hell, and 3% of the population is going to die. That's the headline I remember. So you're talking 9 million people in America are going to die. Like, and it never happened. And the people that had the guts to continue to buy good deals did really, really well. And I think that's what's going to happen right now, because sellers are, I'm not saying this stuff is cheap right now, but they're a little bit more reasonable. They're a little bit more reasonable with some seller financing, et cetera, et cetera. And if you have a deal that will pencil at 6.5%, 7% interest rate, the Fed will lower the rates. The rates will come down. I don't know when that's going to be. If it's going to be in 12 months, 6 months, 24 months, but I'm playing a long game, and I'm going to keep buying good properties that cash flow at today's rents, at today's market. And if they do that, then I'm in the position to get lucky, right? Because I get lucky when all of a sudden rents do start increasing, when rates start falling off. Yeah. Right. And so when the herd is buying, right, 2021, 2022, like, hey, I mean, they bought at the peak of the market, and they'll probably be okay, but it's going to take a long time. But that's one of the main reasons I don't think we're about to fall off the cliff, is because like 60-something% of people are locked into a 30-year mortgage at less than 4%. Right. Where are they going to go? Like, they're going to sell their house and go move into an apartment that's more than their mortgage payment. I don't see, we're kind of in gridlock right now, but people they have options, right? I could just keep paying my cheap mortgage and stay right where I'm at. I'm not about to lose my house like I was in 2007, 8, which is sort of like, we have this PTSD. And pessimists sound smart, optimists get rich. So I'm going to be optimistic cautiously and make the best decisions I can in the current markets, because the rates will come down, and I'm going to look like a genius if I keep buying good deals.
Yeah. Great point. I mean, really, it's true. It's just kind of, you're not suggesting that the idea here that we're talking about is not that you should go out and be reckless and just keep doing stuff despite the market. The idea is you should always maintain your fundamentals. And at the times when we might be in a market down cycle, then there's less competition. Maybe the pricing is a little bit better in your favor as a buyer. Like when everybody was buying in 2021, we were all like having to push our expectations, and the underwriting got less conservative, I would say. And so it's just kind of like you just keep going, and a lot of success comes out of market down cycles where people are like yourself, just continuing to do good deals, and if the fundamentals make sense, then you'll be in good shape. So I think with that, I'm going to switch gears here and ask you the questions that I ask every guest, Jennings. And the first one is, of course, based on the name of the show. I always ask every guest, what is your why? What drives you at this point? And I think I've learned both from personal experience, but just from all the guests I've interviewed, that the why often is evolving over time. So what is your why?
Yeah, my why is fulfilling my potential. I mean, my podcast is Unlock Your Life. And I believe that God's put us all on earth to accomplish a purpose, accomplish a mission. We're not here to float along, live an easy, comfortable life, make enough money to pay our bills, and exist. I don't want that. Right. So my why is to live to the potential to what God has called me to do. And, making money through multifamily, that's great. I love it. It's fun. But it allows me to invest in my children, right? To show them what's possible. It allows me to grow, right? To get out of my comfort zone and do things that are maybe uncomfortable, but they eventually are fun and very rewarding. We run the Deal Room, our mentoring program. And I get to see people close deals. I see people quit their jobs. I see people that were slaves to something that they hated doing now have autonomy and freedom, right? That's a big piece of my why is autonomy and freedom, because even though I really never worked for somebody except for that 1 year, like I always had my own company, I didn't have autonomy. I didn't have freedom. My clients were my boss, right? Especially a custom home client. If you lost a $600,000, $800,000 contract, like right as you're about to break ground, like, I mean, there goes your whole year. So I was very much a slave to them, their wishes, their desires, whether they were happy with me, whether they liked me. I hated that feeling. And I was also like tied to my phone, subcontractors, insurance vendors, employees, clients, billing, all that stuff. And so, yes, I work now, but I have autonomy, right? I don't have to report to somebody. I don't have to please somebody. I can make my own path. And we all have people that, like, I got investors in my deals. I got lenders, and I got to make them happy. But all I got to do is just pay them to make them happy. That's pretty simple,
Right.
So I think that my why is fulfilling my potential, and showing people how to do that as well, and seeing their personal growth. And then the autonomy in my life is great, but I'm not happy if I'm not making progress, and I know that about myself. So I want to continue to make measured, steady progress, and retain that autonomy.
Yeah, I love it. Tell us something about yourself that isn't common knowledge, special skill, hobby, anything you're comfortable sharing, just to let listeners know you better.
Oh, about me that's not common knowledge. I would say I was homeschooled as a kid. I don't really tell a lot of people that. But yeah, from 5th grade to about 10th grade, I was in a homeschooling environment, and there were a lot of good things about that. Some things I didn't like, but a lot of good. And I think it taught me to be curious, right, and how to learn, and how to solve problems, and to wonder why things work. Why do businesses work? Why do people behave the way that they do? And a lot of interaction, with my parents. So that's something that I would say most people don't know about me.
I wonder if that, I don't know if anybody's done this study or looked at the data, but I wonder if homeschooling has any correlation to entrepreneurship in the sense that, I mean, I wasn't homeschooled, so I don't know, but I think, some of that autonomy you spoke about in your career path now, it is maybe related to having that some level of autonomy even as a child in schooling, in the sense that, you're not gotta be at a certain place at a certain time, and sort of go through these classes. But I don't know, just more of a
I think
curiosity thing.
I think it may, but I think it probably has to do with the parents, right? Because, they're going to march to the beat of a different drum. They're going to do something different. This isn't the way, I mean, the masses go to public school, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I mean, my kids go to our Christian school, private school at our church, but, and it's not for everybody. But I think that the parental influence, right? I was with my parents a good bit, is very influential. And so my dad always had that entrepreneurial bend, and he got into real estate, and I want to model that for my children, because I think everybody has nobody's dream is to go work for McDonald's until they're 60 years old, for $10 an hour. Like, there's nobody's
Right.
dream. Everybody would be like, yeah, I'd love to have passive income coming in. I'd love to have all these investments. I'd love to have autonomy, do whatever I want, go on vacation whenever I want, et cetera, et cetera. Who doesn't want that? Right. But understanding what it takes to get there and willing to do the work is a whole nother story. But you gotta have somebody in your life that is modeling that, because you have to have borrowed belief, right? You may not be able to believe that about yourself, and you may not have had that modeled to you by your parents, but there are circles that can model that for you. And Right. And I outgrew some of my, my dad and his teaching, as we all do as children growing up. And I got into other circles, and I got into high level entrepreneur groups, and I saw, whoa, you think you're doing big things? Like, look at these guys, like, look at what they're doing. And it just stretches your imagination and mind of what's possible to see. He's no smarter than me. He works no harder than me. And he has built this, incredible thing. I can too. So I think that if your parents are entrepreneurial, it definitely gives you a leg up because you were brought up in that. And if they weren't, you got to get around that as soon as you can.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. When people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Best way, I mean, just DM me on socials. You can find me Jennings Smith Jr., Jennings Smith Jr. That's my website. My socials are linked there. If you search for me on Facebook, Jennings Smith, Jennings Foster Smith. I'm on Instagram, and I reply to DMs. I talk to people, ask you what they got going on. I'll give you a copy of my free underwriter analyzer, how to use it, get you going if you're interested in multifamily, to just explore that, right? And if it's something that you want to take more seriously, then we can chat further. But it's pretty easy to get a hold of me. If you shoot me a DM, I'll connect with you.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Final question for you, Jennings. What piece of advice would you give to someone who is getting started? They want to hear this. They want to sort of model after you and follow in your footsteps. What would you tell them?
I would say I get a lot of people that reach out to me, and they see something that is flashy, right? And I think this is why a lot of these posts get a lot of traction. People post on Lamborghinis or yachts or private jets or whatever. They're like, oh, dude, I want that. Teach me. But the way that you get there is through making yourself more valuable, right? And so to make yourself more valuable, it isn't just mindset. It's tangible skills, right? It's like, if you want to go into the field that I'm in, okay, well, what do you know about real estate? What do you know about underwriting? Are you willing to cold call brokers? Are you willing to put together pitch decks? Are you willing to have meetings with investors and ask them to give you $100,000? Like, are you willing to do that kind of stuff? Are you willing to make yourself a valuable person so that when the opportunity strikes, you're the guy, right? You're connected to loan sponsors. You're connected to capital. You have deal flow. You know how to asset manage. You know how to underwrite. You know how to tell if stuff's a crappy deal or a good deal, right? That's who people want on their team. That's who gets equity. That's who gets wealthy. Versus, I want the Lamborghini. I want the yacht. I want $1 million. Okay, whatever. So does everybody else. That is of no use to me. I don't care about your dreams and what you want. How valuable are you? And how much time and effort and energy are you going to get put into getting better?
Yeah, that's great advice. You have to bring something to the table. You have to be able to, sort of, and because also, aside from just creating value and providing value to someone who might mentor you or let you work with them, you're making that commitment to yourself, I think, in the sense that, okay, what do I bring to the table here? And if I don't have anything yet, which everybody probably does if you really think about it, but what skill can I get? What am I willing to do those cold calls, like you said? Like, what can I decide to add to my skill set to be of value?
Well, and I think people don't understand that with a lot of mentoring programs and coaching. It's like, well, why isn't it free? Like, what, I'll work for you for free, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. Why don't you just partner with me? I partner with people because they're bringing value to my life. If they can't bring value to my life in the field that they want to be in and that I'm in, then they can bring value into my life by paying me money. I'm sorry to be blunt, but that's just the way it goes. They've extracted value from something that they're doing, trading their time for dollars, and they're transferring that value to me. Therefore, we pour value into them. And eventually, partnerships get formed, deals get done because they've become more valuable. And so if you're not there and you don't have skills and you're asking for somebody to mentor you, to coach you and whatever, and you really can't add anything to them, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very difficult to find that. I mean, I was in a mentoring program, and it was $35,000 a year. And I was like just getting started and getting rolling with apartments. And I'm telling you, like, when I talked to that guy, I did not want to give him 35 grand. I didn't want to join that group. I didn't want to be a part of that, but I did. I saw what they were doing, and I saw the value, and I saw 30 something other millionaires that I could plug into, and I could learn from this dude. And so I pulled the trigger. And when I wired in that money, I mean, no kidding, I probably had like 10, 15 grand left in my bank account after I did that. Right? It wasn't like, oh yeah, you had $1 million, 35 grand, whatever. No, it was like 75% of my liquidity.
Yeah.
It was a big freaking deal. It was a big a deal as putting that $1,000 down for the course, right? It felt the same. It was just it was another level. And yet that guy has literally helped me make millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so but I was willing to pull the trigger and bring value to his life so that I could reciprocate. And most people, they've got that closed fist mindset of like, hey, everything should be free and et cetera, et cetera. And that's fine. You can think that way. see how it turns out for you,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a willingness to invest in yourself. And I think that the mentorship programs, when you don't have the skills, when you don't have something that you're really bringing to the table for them, that is it, that you're sort of paying to that's the value that you're bringing. And then that allows you, it's just investing in yourself, your education, and having that mentorship. And it's funny because a lot of people go to college. That's fine. I'm not against it. I went to a lot of college, but the point is, like, people go to college with no regard for what it costs in a lot of instances. And they're just, yeah, here's I'll take those student loans, or I'll do that. And it's like, even the mentorship of $35,000, like that's the value that you got there, in sort of allowing you to make millions of dollars within real estate is probably far greater than almost any college degree that you could get, similarly cost maybe. But I think it's shifting that mindset and being willing to invest in yourself in some way.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love Clemson, go Tigers, but I mean, I learned how to use Microsoft Word, Excel, and I can write a paper. But that was it. I mean, I was a business major. I have general, business, and I can't say that anything translated. And I paid $100 grand, and that's cheap now.
Right.
It's
Right.
probably double
Right.
that now.
The costs have gone up so much. Yeah.
But yeah, it's but it isn't fair. And I think people that focus on like wanting it to be fair, or focusing on, oh, well, President Biden is holding me back, or Trump is going to save me, or these policies or that. And the news, it's like, none of that matters. You have to focus on your microcosm. How can I push my goal forward today? How can I plug into those circles? If I got to pay to get in those circles, then I'm going to pay, even though it's maybe not fair. I don't care. I'd rather be successful than try to make the world fair. I'm going to do what works. It's like, that's why country clubs exist. That's why private schools exist. That's why colleges exist. It's because it's pay to play. And if you don't have a lot of value you're bringing to the equation, then you're probably going to have to pay.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, Jennings, this has been great. I appreciate your time coming on and sharing your story. I think really a lot of great value there for people listening. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, Jason, it was a great time. Appreciate you.
Yeah. And folks listening, I know you're going to get a lot of value out of this episode. Please like, rate, and review the show so we can continue to get more great guests like Jennings. Thank you all for listening.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.